recorded. I'll ask folks to introduce themselves around the room, and then we'll go to our CWAC members online. So I'm going to start with the person who's directly across from me.
All right, I'm Sherilyn Lagos. I'm city manager in Tualatin, and I'm the city representative for the Washington County Cities non-voting rep.
Gwen Fee of Environment 1.
Alan Jesse, Agriculture 2.
Andy Haugen, District 4. Mark Farrow, Builder Developer Representative.
Elaine Stewart, Environment 2.
Catherine Harrington, Board Chair 1 of 1.
Stu Peterson, Business 2.
I'm Jenny Gutierrez, Clean Water Services.
Terry Song, District 3 Neighborhood and Chair.
Elizabeth Edwards, Chief of Staff for Clean Water Services.
I'm Jody Newcomer, an editor of Clean Water Services.
Dale Feig, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network.
Catherine Hughes, CFO to Clean Water Services.
Josh Munson, Clean Water Services.
Rick Shanley, Chief Engineer and Water Technology Officer for Clean Water Services.
Good evening, Joe Gall. I'm the Chief Utility Relations Officer for Clean Water Services.
Wade Kenny, I'm the Division Manager of our Basin Chair Department of Clean Water Services.
Shannon Huggins, Community Engagement, Clean Water Services.
Here you go. Mark Graves, the Oregonian, photographer.
Kate Raxdale, Executive Assistant.
And I'm Todd Santa. I'm here with IT, making sure everything.
Go to our folks online. Ramesh, you look like you're off.
Yeah,
mute.
this is Ramesh Krishnamurthy. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Oh,
I'm
we
not
can't
on
hear
mute,
you.
I think. Oh, let me check.
You try chiming in. Let's see if it's on our end.
Sure. You can hear me now? Let's do something.
Second. Okay, so
Perhaps, okay.
If Rebecca can hear Ramesh.
yeah, so it's our audio.
Speakers are off.
Is this better?
Try and set a speakers.
There's only just one.
I can hear Ramesh. This is Matt Wellner. I'm a builder developer rep. So I thought I can hear Ramesh. I don't know if you guys can though.
Okay, is this better? Can you hear me?
Let's see if I can.
Yes, I can, Ramesh.
Put my audio on the.
Hello, can you, is this,
You didn't.
I don't know if you can hear me.
You should come here and I'll go down there.
Hello.
There.
I got some IT support here. Thank you. Yeah, this is Ramesh, District 2.
This is Rebecca Shell, District 1. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Get that.
Matt.
Wellner, builder developer rep 2.
Do the other folks online want to introduce themselves?
You need to call on them so they know to speak.
EDM? EDM. Jamie?
This is Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian.
Last call on EDM. Okay.
I joined a couple minutes late, but Ashley Farrell, business rep, is also on the Zoom call.
Thank you, Ashley.
Okay, thank you, everyone. First on our agenda is Rick Shanley, John Johnson, and Wade Denny of the Water and Engineering Technology Department presenting on the West Basin Master Plan final update. And our CWAC subcommittee on this was Andy, Mark, and Elaine. Thank you for all that.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Shanley. Glad to be here tonight to talk about the West Basin Plan. This is the final update. This is not the final meeting that we were going to have. So we will be presenting kind of an executive briefing that captures all of the work that's been done and coming back, I believe, in June to get your final, hopefully your final recommendation to move forward to take it to the board for approval and adoption. I'm going to be joined by Wade, who's talking about some of the conveyance projects, Josh Johnson, and I also want to thank our subcommittee. We've had some good meetings together. It was great to have a small focus group to get a lot of feedback on things like non-economic criteria as we move through. So Andy, Mark, and Elaine, thanks again for participating and sharing your thoughts. So briefly, I'm going to do the background and review part because it has been a while since we've been here. So just talk a little bit about what the plan is and why we're doing it and what's some of the key hopeful outcomes will be as we develop it. We're going to talk about the conveyance capital improvement plan, and I'll give a little reminder of what the CIP is and how that fits into the overall process. And then we'll move into the water resource recovery facility stuff, which Josh will lead, next steps, and then a subcommittee report. So back to the basics. Why do a master plan? It really is a roadmap for upgrading and expanding our treatment and conveyance infrastructure. So this plan is done comprehensively. We look at everything as one kind of big system with all of our conveyance and all of our treatment works built together and how to best move flows and treat within the West Basin. It does not include stormwater or some sub-basin planning or some other pieces which are done separately. So just want to be clear on that piece. So we have gone through the basin characteristics, the growth and the future flows. So those are really the anchors for the planning work that we have to do to project what's going to happen in the area. What do we see with respect to changes in industrial flows? Where's the growth going to occur? So we presented a lot of information on that. Having that sound structure is really key to making this plan successful. And then we do a lot of alternatives analysis. Do we build a pipe? Do we build a pump station? How do we upgrade the treatment plant? Where do we send the flows to which treatment plant? And so we'll talk a little bit tonight about some of the alternatives, the bigger alternatives that we looked at. And eventually we put together the CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Program. And that is the roadmap for the next 20 years, in particular with the real focus on the 5 to 10 year window. What are all the projects that we need to do? And what are the dollars that are associated with those projects? And those then get turned over to finance and Kathy, and we'll start to figure out how we're going to structure these and accommodate the resources we need to deliver those projects and make sure we can be in compliance and provide the opportunity for our area to grow and protect the watershed, of course, while we're doing all that. So just the brief background to orient everyone. We have an East Basin and we have a West Basin. So the East Basin plan was completed a couple years ago. They both address some of the common themes of how do we deal with climate resiliency, seismic resiliency, a lot of regulatory challenges that we predict what's going to come to us in the future. PFAS, the forever chemicals that are in the paper a lot, are something we've spent time figuring out and trying to plot our position on how to best be able to accommodate those needs. So the East Basin's done. The West Basin has 3 treatment plants. I'm going to try. My pointer doesn't work. One in Forest Grove, which is where our wetland system is, our natural treatment system. One in Hillsborough, and then our Rock Creek facility, which is our biggest facility in the West Basin. And that accommodates a lot of the industries that we talk to. It's really important to know that, of course, there's lots of member cities in the West Basin, and Joe could rattle them all off real quickly, backwards and forwards. We've met with them at the beginning when we were doing the basis of planning. We'll be meeting with them over the course of the next 6 weeks so they understand our recommendations and they know what the needs are for the cities and where their capacity bottlenecks are as well. If there's questions for any of us while we're talking to, feel free to ask them.
Yeah, Ramesh here. If you
Yeah.
go back to the previous slide, what are those two little independent islands there about, Banks and North Plains, and what happens to the space between them, like Cornelius and so on?
That's farmland.
The space between, yeah, so we convey the flow from Banks and North Plains into the West Basin. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so those green areas are part of the service area that we provide full convey. We take their flow and we ultimately treat it.
I see. And
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
So companion to the East Basin plan, I talked about that. Improvements to facilities to get to the growth. We'll talk about some examples of that. It is an integrated long-term master plan. We do our best to really work with our governmental partners as well as our regulatory affairs group and our watershed groups as well. So we're trying to really step back and take a big picture, look at what's going to best serve the watershed over the long term, not just from a cost-effective standpoint, but from an uplift perspective and from really maintaining the level of service that is expected of everyone, all of our ratepayers. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wade, and he's going to talk about some of our conveyance.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'm Wade Denny. I'm the Conveyance Engineering Division Manager. I'll be talking about our conveyance plan that we put together as part of this overall facilities plan. So I just want to start out with a little bit of a timeline here. So as we start these plans, we have to kind of walk down a path to kind of develop our criteria that allows us to again start looking a little closer at what do we have coming towards us, what are our constraints, and then we kind of get a little deeper where we dive into some of the capacity mapping. We do a lot of modeling to figure out our capacity. This helps us really drive in the needs that we have in our system, understand where we have deficits. And then we kind of factor another layer, which is our I&I analysis. Now, for you don't know what I&I is, I don't expect you to, that's inflow and infiltration. That's the water we don't want in our pipes. That's the water that we want to keep out of our pipes. We look really closely at that because sometimes that's a really costly solution for a good cost solution for us to take out capacity by eliminating that water in the upper basins. And then we start playing with the alternatives. We start developing alternatives. I think we had 5,000 or 6,000 alternatives we put together. Used a lot of different ways to review those alternatives. So ultimately, we were able to rank those and then develop these alternatives we want to push forward into the capital improvement plan, which leads us here today to be able to start talking about that. We do have our next steps, which is developing some more tools to help us kind of track where we're at in regards to some of these capacity limitations, and also broadcast some more of what we're doing and track also the capital expenditures associated with this plan. So one of the things we start out with is really looking closely at where we expecting growth. Growth is one of those things where we have to use kind of our fuzzy crystal ball at times. And we have to plan for flexibility. So one of the aspects of this plan that we wanted to implement is flexibility. That was a key thing to have. So we had a look at where our growth is coming from, focus on the urban areas that are known within the urban reserve, as well as with the urban growth boundary. But we also want to look at these areas that have potential to come in, because it's likely they could come in within the horizon of this 20-year plan. So we looked at these areas that were in undesignated reserves and historic reserves as well, to then factor in what would happen if they did come in. So we developed a plan that allowed different off-ramps to allow us to accommodate those type of flows that could come into our system from there. Any questions?
Got one.
Yes.
So your map, the original map, it just appeared to show the city limits that were in the West Basin plan. But does it incorporate the urban reserves?
It does. So what you see here, these different shaded areas, the kind of oranges area, purples and pinks, and the greens, those are all urban.
They just didn't show up in the original, in the West Basin plan, that's why I asked.
They're there. So that map that Rick previously had up, was that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
That map was specific, just kind of big aerial overview. It wasn't in detail. This is more of a planning level map. So this is what we use to really dive in. This is taken more off the GIS we use. So it shows more connectivity. You can see Banks and a line drawn from Banks into Forest Grove. That's the forest main that conveys flow from Banks, for example. So that's how everything kind of gets together is through the system, either conveyance via gravity or conveyance via pressure.
That's underground.
That's underground. Yep. It's all built underground. So if you look here at the bottom right of the screen here, this is our predictions for flows or base flows coming into the Rock Creek plant. So you can see from now until 2050, you can see our flows are almost doubling during that time. So we're expecting a lot of growth to happen based on what Metro's predicting as far as population growth and also industrial growth based on our conversations with both the industrial users as well as the various city members that are more privy to what's going on at the industrial level. So we mentioned inflow and infiltration. So part of our cost-effective investment is really looking closely at that. This graph got skewed, I think, in this conversion, but basically all the green line, the curve of the line is supposed to map the curve of the bar graph that's shown there. But what we see here on that bar graph is different rates of infiltration reduction and different costs of the capital improvement plan. So if you look at the x-axis and look to the far right on there, that's the most stringent level of INI reduction we can do. And that's also the associated costs at the far left side on the y-axis is the cost associated with that. And so we were trying to find kind of the sweet spot where we focus in on INI reduction, but also see the benefits as far as at the treatment plant and the conveyance capacity that we need to provide. And so we found kind of a dip in that curve, which showed us where we wanted to focus our INI reduction efforts. And it's a pretty major part of the plan. So we wanted to make sure we were getting that right, ensuring that we weren't, sending more flows to the plant than we should be sending them when we could remove that from the upper system through INI abatement, for example. And the next big part of this look at cost-effective investment is our R&R program, our repair and replacement program. This is a program that we look at the existing useful life of our infrastructure. So on our pipelines, we have defects, we have a useful life that we can calculate based on current condition. We use all that to basically form a plan that allows us to look at what we can expect that we need to spend on just this replacement of our existing pipelines. This isn't replacement in regards to capacity, this is just replacement because these pipes are aging out and we want to be able to serve our public effectively. So we look really closely at that to understand the effect that can have on us. Resiliency was another big objective. We know we've seen climate change happen to us. Here in the district, we've seen different storms come through, so we wanted to look at our design storm. This was an effort that took a lot of staff time to look specifically at current storms that we're seeing and looking at what those models are going to show into the future. Was there a question? No. Keep going. So when we had to look at that, we saw that we were going to need to increase our design storm by adding a little more volume to that storm and also a little bit short-term intensity as well. The next big thing is seismic. We live in an area that's susceptible to Cascadia conduction zone earthquake. So we want to be prepared for that. A lot of being prepared is just understanding what we have in our system. So we know that we have areas that are highly susceptible to landslides and liquefaction. Our pipelines are located near creeks most of the time. That's a good area for liquefaction to occur or for landslides to occur. So we want to be prepared as we're moving forward with project design to understand those constraints and look at those closer, but also design fail-safe ways to actively plan for failures that we can then quickly get back online by creating slip joints and other features that allow us to plan and get back online within a short amount of time, given the potential for a big event like this. So this kind of walks us down the path that we go through as we're developing our plan itself. We start with looking over these alternatives. Like I mentioned, we have like 5,000 or 6,000 alternatives. Start looking at those at the capital cost level. Then we look a little closer at their life cycle costs. This helps us to understand the investment we're going to see annually in order to serve these assets. And then we move forward with the non-financial scores. So these non-financial metrics were the same metrics and weightings that the CWAC committee recommended previously. We use those based on scores that we were looking at internally. And we composite all these scores together to look over how all these projects weighed out. So we're focusing on projects with low capital costs, low life cycle costs, and a high non-financial score. That's kind of the areas we're focused on. As long as those meet our minimum risk factors, that allows us to advance that alternative forward.
You have a question, online question.
Yes, online. Matt, please.
Yeah, thanks. On your previous slide, you said you're assuming a 10% increase in your design storm. Is that because of climate change? Is it because of growth? Is it because of a combination of the two?
It's more or less related to the climate change and the intensities of the storms we've seen. So we've seen kind of different storms happen to us over the years and different times of the year. Traditionally, we would see a lot of big storms in kind of the January, December timeframe. We see storms that come on that are pretty intense, further out more into the springtime that can stress our system. So we look closely at these historical storms. And then we looked at some of the models that were predicting what's going to happen in our system, into the future, as a result of climate change. So it's kind of a combination, more or less, of what's going to happen climate-wise than development-wise.
And are we making any assumptions today about how that might affect our design standards?
So all of that factors into more or less how we size pipes and facilities. So that's the biggest factor on that. So as we're looking at these, this allows us to put the right size pipe in, build the right facility downstream to treat that water that's coming towards that.
Okay, but is that 10% increase, I guess, factored into our current standards, or is this kind of a look into the future?
This is a look into the future, more or less along the lines of what we're doing at the planning level. So at the developer level, this isn't going to necessarily affect you, but it will affect you because we'll have capacity for you to be able to be served by in the future. We won't be limited by capacity. So we're trying to look over, our climate crystal ball and say, hey, we have a need. We know that the changes are happening in our system based on climate effects. We want to make sure we can understand that a little bit better and understand how to prepare for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Any questions on this slide? Keep moving through. So after us looking at these alternatives, looking at different ways to approach these solutions, what we came up with basically was a plan that maximizes our flows to Rock Creek. This allows us to transfer some flows off of several trunks that are more capacity limited right now and free up that capacity that allows us to avoid some major improvements on these big trunk lines. And then allows us to serve these areas that are potential to grow with flexibility, like North Hillsborough, for example. So this is a list not of all the projects, but of more of the larger projects associated with our Rock Creek Basin. I'm not going to talk about these, but I'll dive into a few of these a little bit deeper the next few slides. So our biggest project right now identified in the plan is our Beaverton Interceptor. This is a large project. It's driven by existing growth as well as I&I influence and future growth as well. We have a plan in place that allows for I&I reduction and also a plan to allow us to evaluate how that I&I reduction has decreased the need to, has changed the need to size this pipe. So kind of looking at a range of sizing for this pipe based on how effective the I&I reduction is ultimately. And then we have some backup projects in place, like I mentioned, these off ramps that allow us to change how we're delivering the flow in case we get a big user upstream and we need to really send that flow directly to the plant a little faster than we can make all these big gravity improvements, because these are big investments. Phase one, we're looking at trying to have online by 2030. You can see the price tag there. We're projecting up to about $54 million for that project. Phase two, we want to have online by 2033. That's close to a $47 million projection on that cost. Phase 3 and 4 are both large investments, by 2040 to 2043, getting those all online. So these are big undertakings. They're going to disturb a lot of, residents per se. Some of these pipelines are people's backyards. So they're going to be all tricky projects. So I wanted to broadcast it today. Our Lower Rock Creek Interceptor is one of our next largest project that we have planned out. This is our lower system that connects in directly with the Rock Creek plant. This system, we're looking at having to make improvements on it by about 2045. This will all be kind of dependent on the range of I&I reduction we can see upstream. And it's looking to be about a $79 million investment at the high end of our estimate right now. Another important project to us is our Turner Creek project. This is a project where there's existing capacity limitations that are pretty pronounced right now, things that we're watching right now. So it has us thinking about this area currently. And so it's an area that we weren't surprised to see come up on this plan. But there's some I&I influences associated with that. And there's, part of this project is doing some I&I abatement to help mitigate that and maybe decreasing the sizing of some of that downstream conveyance pipeline. But you can see the different phases. We're recommending 4 phases on this project. First phase online by 2030. Phase 2 also online by 2030. These are kind of the 2 most important areas to improve. And then phases 3 and 4, 2035 and 2045, those phases are a little more spread out because we're going to do some I&I abatement in between phase 2 and phase 3. And that will allow us to kind of right size phase 3 and 4 for those pipelines. Our Dawson pump station expansion in Dawson Trunk. This project is driven by industrial growth. Intel is one of those big users up in this area. It serves that Brookwood area of Hillsboro. We're looking at having this pump station expanded by 2032. It's going to be about $11 million hit to make that expansion happen. Our Dawson Trunk is another one. It's an existing 24-inch. We're going to upsize it to 42 inches. We want to see that online by 2040. And it's going to be about a $16 million investment right now.
So a question on the industrial, can you go back to the previous? So the industrial growth, is Intel the biggest growth? I think there are quite a few other industries there, Genentech and so on. Aren't they contributing any to this industrial growth?
They're definitely contributing, but Intel is our biggest user in this area. So they do have one of the biggest influences on our system in this particular area.
And that's considering all the campuses.
This is considering all the campuses that are tributary to the Rock Creek Basin, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Hillsboro and Forest Grove, we see a number of projects here. I've highlighted just 5 of them here. 2 of the biggest ones are our I&I reduction projects. We want to do some I&I reduction in our McKay Creek area. This is going to help free up some flows. Some of these flows come in from Intel to this system in particular. And this 2 MDD reduction we're hoping to get out of here will help us avoid some upgrades to that McKay Creek trunk. We want to do some I&I reduction in Forest Grove as well. This is a pretty large program. We're looking at a $30 million program over 20 years. So this is an investment that will let us, reduce the improvements at the plant itself, and as well as some of the conveyance pipelines that go to the plant. Our Council Creek pump station and force main. This is a critical one. This allows us to transfer flows. This allows us to move flows from what would be going to our Hillsboro treatment plant into our Forest Grove plant. This frees up some capacity in our Hillsboro trunk line and allows us to avoid having to upsize that line. This is a big investment, it's about a $19 million investment. We want to have online by 2029. Our West Forest Grove trunk. This is one that's really fueled by development out in West Forest Grove. It's one that we want to see invested in by about 2035. And you can see the pricing there, it's about $9 million there. Our Cornelius trunk, this is one that will do some upsizing on the existing gravity line, as well as some small upgrades to the pump station itself. It's about an $11 million investment. Any questions? Yes, go ahead, Sneesha.
I was just wondering, what are examples of I&I reduction measures that you would do?
It's a good question. So we do a few things. Some things involve trenchless construction. Sometimes if we're able to do that because, say, the pipeline itself has adequate capacity to serve this area, into the future, we can do trenchless construction on there. So CIPP, lining cured in place pipelining, is where you slip a fiberglass liner and blow it up with usually UV steam or UV treatment in order to harden that liner. And that line area becomes like a pipe inside the pipe that has full capacity and full structural rating to handle the loads on it. Another example would be pipe bursting. We send a HDPE pipe through and it basically explodes the old pipe and the new pipe pulls into its place and we reconnect all the services. And that's kind of the two probably most prominent methods to do for ionized reduction. We do have situations that require us to have to just install new pipelines. For example, we have areas that are served by asbestos pipe. In those areas, it's a little trickier to serve. We can't burst that. So in those areas, we may have to look at doing some open cut construction, putting in pipelines more traditional as well.
So you're doing that without excavation?
There's some excavation usually at the pit. So there's always, kind of a push pit for the technology when you're doing pipe bursting for the CIPP lining, for example, that you can do through the maintenance holes themselves. So you do have to do excavation to reconnect services and stuff. There's always a little bit of
Just in spots. Okay, so then when you're replacing the pipe, you're gonna have to excavate.
We'll have to excavate, yeah.
And you're going on private property. Does your easement allow you to do that without compensation to the property owner?
So a lot of times when we're approaching these areas, we're gonna have to get a new easement, it's a new negotiation. So we have to go through the full gamut of conversations, building those relationships with the property owners and, trying to figure out a solution that works for them and works for us too.
So is this gonna be paid for with STCs?
STCs will pay for this and maybe, I don't know, potential for bonding as well for some of these larger projects.
So the timing that you have in this foil, I am assuming is the time window, not how long these projects are going to take, right?
Exactly. This is the window that we want to see these projects online by. So this is kind of the deadline we have to implement these projects. You can look at it that way.
So can you give me an idea how long, if you from start to finish, these projects are going to take? Is it months? Is it years?
So you're setting me up for the next slide here, which shows more of a timeline here. So I think this gets to your question here. So you can see in the next 5 years, we have a pretty heavy amount of projects to implement. These projects are kind of front end loaded. And you look over the next 5 to 10 years, you can see the next big gamut of projects needs to be implemented as well. So this is kind of the horizon we need to look at, starting to plan, starting to design, and then ultimately construct within these areas shown within each blue line here. Some of these larger lines that really extend out, basically up to 2055. These are our ionized reduction plans. So these are longer programs and they're more spread out. And then you can look at how the plan kind of tapers off in the coming years. I think this answers your question, Ramesh.
Yeah, answers my question, but at the same time, sustaining these projects for that long without any cost escalations is going to be a concern, right?
Cost of construction is always rising. We try to look at this in our planning. So we try to estimate, where those are going to be. That's why you see kind of a low and high cost. It's a range of costs where these are class 5 cost estimates. So this is plus or minus, 50% on the low end, 100% on the high end. So there's a lot of discrepancy in actually what that number will be, but it's our best guess, a range of costs. It helps us at least to start budgeting for those investments.
So we are constantly, we're always updating every year the timing of the project. So these are flow projections. We're pretty good in the next 3 to 5 years, but even sometimes you may have a big industrial. So every year we revisit the numbers and we revisit the timing and we develop, and I think Josh is going to talk about a specific thing called a trigger plot that helps us to do that quickly. So we don't have to redo the whole master plan every year, but we do this every year. We go back and we'll be presenting an updated CIP again pretty quickly. And then we'll go back and look at flows and loads and how they changed from our crystal ball predictions and as well as where the cost environment is as well.
But it's still based on revenue projections. What if the revenue projections don't come in? The STCs, if the development's slowed down in a lot of places, obviously. So how do you do that? I mean, what happens there? I mean, how do you do that? How do you budget?
I'll let Kathy, I'll take a little shot at it, let Kathy and Diane. I mean, we do our best to project those. That's partly how we come up with our rate increases. as well as revisiting what the STC charges should be based upon the long-term projection.
But it's not just paid for by SDCs.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to chime in. Given you've pointed out a couple of times SDCs. These capital costs have to be borne by all of the ratepayers. And it's one reason why we have the reserves that we have so that there's balance, building the finances over time.
And so you can go back to there's no, you can just charge the ratepayers more for their services, correct, to cover some of these capital
Well,
costs.
that's one financial.
And bonding's the
strategy.
other, right?
That's right, yeah.
I think what we've done really well, though, is maintained a pretty consistent, steady amount of rate increase and very much try to avoid the spikes that you might see. If you do have a big project that was unanticipated, comes in way over budget. So between the reserves and just doing our best to project, we're able to deal with the noise pretty well with it.
It's a tough science, I get it.
It is, but I can say as a board member that I feel very well served by the financial prowess of the CFO so that we're able to have steady rate increases and rate revenue so that we don't have these spikes. So it's a more of a smooth experience and more predictable for our customer base. Because I was paying attention to the data as we were going through here. The projects that were talked about were through 2045, which folks is only 20 years from now. And you total it all up, my $465 million.
And the total of all the projects
Today's dollar.
is double that. It's closer to about $850 million. So with all the implementation projects we want to see, that's the number we're looking at.
Like 20 years.
This is over the course of the design life, so we're saying 20 years to take us through,
Got it.
2045, but we've looked into 2075. So I'm looking out, a little bit further to say what happens if all this happens, in this time that we're kind of predicting through our crystal ball, right?
Design life.
And what's really great about this team, so they have a plan, but they implement it, and you'll be talking about the trigger plot. So it's just not a project we're gonna implement. The timeline, they're always looking for when they should build it. And then all along the way, they do value engineering to be able to make sure that we're getting the right price for the right project. So they're always adjusting the timeline. So that's why the plan is for these steady rate increases, so that we are building the rate reserve to be able to build these projects in the long run. Because it's tough on the rate base when you spike the base to be able to pay for these projects.
So this doesn't include what the cities do, right? So like the pipes that the city is responsible for, because all the cities have their own capital improvement plan and master plans for sewer, but like they work together clearly, but the $800 million doesn't include like what Hillsborough has in place for their local component, right?
So this is looking at pipes kind of 10 inches or larger. That's what we looked at. So there are some city pipes, like some of these I&I programs. These are the cost splits with the cities. So there's considerable investments at the city level too for some of these projects as well. Some of these other trunk lines, like I showed you the Turner Creek project, for example. First two phases are done by CWS, the last two phases are done by Hillsborough. So there's investments there. So this does include city projects for the larger size pipes. And so we've tried to, level the costs as much as possible to avoid major rate increases. And this is our best attempt at doing this. This is what we're predicting we can do as far as expenditures go. You can see in the next 5 years, we do get a pretty big spike, close to $50 million. But then the preceding years, we lower that and stay pretty level all the way through about 2045. And then we start dropping off our spending as our investments paid at that time. And like Diane mentioned, we're always evaluating these projects. So we're not gonna do a project just because we said we were gonna do it. We're doing the project because our flows show that we need to do it, because development's saying we need to do it. We kind of use those as our drivers versus, the modeling. The modeling is a great tool. It gets us pretty far. It helps us develop these plans. but it's a model, it's a little bit of engineering and art, I look at it that way. And you have to make assumptions to make, those predictive elements happen that allows us to really see where those capacity increases are gonna happen and the timing of those. And, if we talk to, I think, the development community, they're always ready for more capacity now and now. And we want to be ready for them, but we always have to look at what's happening. What are we seeing in the system? What type of stress are we seeing? What is our risk? And keeping our risk low is always our goal. So we're trying to look at keeping all that water inside our pipelines, all that water treated at our plants is always our main goal. And that's how we factor in the risk. We're looking at the hydraulic profiles of these pipelines through our model. We're looking at those flows and whatnot that are coming down both at our treatment plant and our remote flow monitors we put throughout our system. We have close to about 120 flow meters that we spread throughout our system to capture that data. We're always moving those around and studying what that data is showing us. Any other questions?
How does this compare with the east? So they're just as many projects like in the East Basin plan?
No, the East Basin's it's a lot simpler of a system. There's two big conveyance pipelines that bring flow into the plant and there's, one plant. This has 3 plants in it. This has, 3 different satellite cities, North Plains, Banks, and Gaston. So there's a lot more complexities in the West Basin. We also do some things that Josh will get into with flow transfer in there that brings flows in between the plants. So this is a lot bigger system. This is a lot heavier investment. Yes.
So my question is probably more of a Diane and Kathleen question. With the CIP here, what kind of interplay is Hag Lake going to have with this? And I'm asking you to look in your crystal ball right now, but will there be the potential for some of these things to have to be delayed or deferred to shift funds for Hag Lake work? What do you anticipate?
Right now, the Bureau of Reclamation is updating their cost estimates. So it's about 1.14 against the current 1 billion. So that's a big B behind it. The repayment contractors, that's what they call us. So the Palm Valley Irrigation District, the Joint Water Commission, and Clean Water Services. So we're obligated to pay back 15%. The irrigators also have more federal support because there's an ability to pay component of that. So the BOR is looking at the distribution between, and we need a lot of work internally to talk through that. It's expensive. And also to be able to talk to the Bureau of Reclamation and how we can get some other support. So Kathy's been looking at the scenarios because what happens during the repayment time is at the end of construction, they tell us what our split is, and then it's like a debt service. So the question is, do we have to pay it back over 20 years? Can we get a 30-year repayment? Could we get a 50-year repayment? And what's the underlying interest rate? So Kathy's been calculating this so that in a 2039 scenario, we know what that repayment could potentially be. So that's why Kathy is very protective of our underlying funds, that we can manage all of this as well as managing the bonding. Yeah, so that's all ready in Kathy's mind and how we're looking at our long range. Because our whole goal is to have steady and predictable rates.
And that really helps us out on the implementation side. We have funding that's available to us. We can plan these projects, and we know long-term we're going to be able to fund those. So that's a big help to us all. Any more questions for me? I'm going to turn this over to Josh. He's going to talk about our water resource recovery plan.
Yeah, so the water resource recovery facility planning kind of happens in parallel with the conveyance system planning. It takes really a similar approach. So we start with the population forecasts, basin characteristics, growth, and historical data. Next step in that, so we go through, we document all our design criteria. For each of our facilities, we have a computer process model. So we go through a process of updating that model with any changes that have happened, any changes in how we operate. And then we take historical data and calibrate and validate that model to make sure it's doing a good job predicting, the results that we see. And then we take the growth information, project out our future flows and loads. And those projections are also used for the conveyance plan. That's how we make sure that what we're doing on the conveyance side aligns with what we're doing on the water resource recovery facility side. So then now that we know what our flows and loads in the future look like, we go through kind of run those models for each year out into the future, out to our 2045, and then our build out case. And then we start looking at when and where new capacity needs to be added. When we see, okay, that we find a spot that where we run out of capacity, we'll evaluate alternatives for upgrading. And then that becomes the basis for our capital improvement program. And then the work we do kind of in parallel with putting together the financial plan is to go through and plan out what the site for each water resource recovery facility looks like as we build it out. So, if we know we need to add a tank or a building, where does that go on site? Just to make sure that we're kind of planning for the future and not boxing ourselves in a way that we can't add a process or expand the process when we're needed. So you'll see the term flows and loads in the master plan. Flow, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, and there's some processes that are really only flow driven. So a good example of this is a pump station, right? Pump station really just cares about the volume of water. Other processes are just driven by loading. Loading is just the pounds per day of a parameter that we need to treat. So this can be something like solids or oxygen demand, which is a measure of the biological activity in wastewater. An example of this is our secondary treatment process. So photo here is the secondary treatment process at Rock Creek. Loads are calculated based on the flow we project out and historical information. So as we're projecting our flows in the future, we're doing the same thing with loading. And then a kind of important thing to understand about planning for the water resource recovery facilities is that we really need to test out our process simulations at a range of different conditions for both wet weather and dry weather. We have different permit conditions in different times of year. And there's also sometimes a peak load can occur during dry weather, whereas a peak flow would occur during wet weather. So it's not enough just to look at the biggest storm on the biggest day. We also need to look at average conditions over a range of different times of year. You're also going to see the term unit process a lot in the master plan, and that bears maybe a little bit of explanation. So a unit process is just a step in our overall treatment process, but it really includes everything that goes into that step. So there's treatment equipment, but there's also buildings, tanks, piping. An example here is the primary clarifier process at Rock Creek, where expanding the unit process there involved a good amount of demolition work and a bunch of new construction. So sometimes expanding unit process is just as simple as adding a piece of equipment, but a lot of times it's more complex, and we have to plan for the money and the space to do that. Trigger plots. So trigger plots are kind of the heart of our water resource recovery planning process. You're going to see a lot of these in the master plan. So over there on the vertical axis is either the flow or load we're looking at. The horizontal axis is time. The dots there are actual historical data. And then the blue lines are what our model forecasts we're going to see going out in the future. Then the red line going across is whatever capacity we have now. So the thing we really care about on the trigger plot is where the blue line and the red line cross. And that tells us that we're predicting that at that point in the future, we're going to have a need for more capacity than we have. Rick had mentioned that these are kind of continuously updated. So if you notice on this one, the dots over on the far left in the 20 teens line up with that line pretty well, but more recently we've been a little bit under what we predict. So if that trend continued in the future, it's likely that we would be able to push out when we need capacity. So that's why this is not just a static plan or something we do once every so often. We're continually looking at this and kind of doing a check of, okay, does does what's in the plan match up what we're seeing in reality? And if if it says that we need to do a project later or sooner, we adjust to do that. Any questions there? I know this is a pretty important concept in our planning, so want to make sure we answer any questions folks have. All right, well, experts. Our CIP, the kind of high level overview of our water resource recovery CIP looks like this. In the next 5 years, we have, and we're not going to go into each project in detail. There's plenty of space in the report for that. But in the next 5 years, we have a couple of big projects at Rock Creek and another couple of projects at Forest Grove and one at Hillsborough. I'll note that a couple of those projects at Hillsborough and Forest Grove are things where we may be technically out of capacity, but we can manage by sending flows to one plant or another. So while we can, if something's driven by, say, a peak day flow, sometimes we can take some of that peak flow and send it to a different plant to treat, and that way we can delay the need for an upgrade. A number of other things on the 20-year horizon. So secondary expansion and digester expansion at Rock Creek, high rate clarification, dewatering. Yeah, we don't need to go into detail on all these again. There's going to be plenty of space in the plan for that, but this is kind of an overview of what our program for the water resource recovery facilities looks like over the next going out to 2075. So next steps, I mentioned site planning. Long-term site planning is essential for reserving the space for future processes. So now that we know what projects we need to do, part of what we're working on now is updating the layout for each facility. So the image here is our Rock Creek facility. The projects in purple are projects that are happening right now. Projects in blue are part of the 20-year CIP, and projects in orange are the build out. So what we need to do in the next going out to 2075. We also, when we do the site planning, we try to figure out what areas we want to reserve. So you see, pointer's not working, I guess, but there's a few areas that we block out just to make sure that we don't put something else there, because we think that if there's a regulatory change or some other condition changes, we may need that space for a process that we're not necessarily planning on doing right now, but could do in the future. So that's part of making sure our plan's flexible, so that we're always able to adapt to what happens. A question? Yeah.
This is actually a couple slides back, but the trigger point one, trigger plot. So because the 2012 facility plan projection was at a much steeper rate, but now we've tracked at a less steep rate, has there been projects that have been taken off the CIP, or does that just push the timeline out?
Yeah, good question. It tends to just push things out. Although if something pushes out far enough, it kind of goes off our planning horizon where we're not necessarily looking at needing to do it anymore. So if a project pushes all the way out past 2075, then we'll take another look at the next plan and figure out if we still need to do it. But in general, that would just move a project forward or backward, depending on how our actual results compare to what we're modeling.
The thing that can push projects off is sometimes we're able to develop a different technology from what we expected. So there's one in the East Basin where the original consulting report had us building a bunch of called gravity thickener fermenters, and we did some research and figured out if we heated up the material going into those units, we could go from building 6 of them to 2 of them. And so that type of adaptation to changing in technology is something that that's what makes the job a lot of fun. But that can make projects go away or save a lot of money. And even with, there was one on there for secondary treatment at Rock Creek. We're testing a process right now. We call it intensification. So within the same footprint, trying to figure out a new way to make one of those unit processes do probably 30% more capacity without having to build anything more than a very small device that concentrates basically the good bacteria that do treatment. So those are the fun ways to kind of get something off the books entirely. Otherwise, if it's all the same treatment process, it's really as simple as that, the slope of that curve going up and down and the capacity of where you're at.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay? Okay, but so this is just one trigger plot for one part of the whole process that you showed us in an earlier block diagram. Isn't this though also speaking to the difference in projection models and newer techniques for modeling perhaps? Because you have the 2012 facility plan projection that used the best modeling tools you had at the time. And so you represented that here, but now you have a camp projection and another modeled projection. And these are the projection models you're using now.
Yep.
So based upon your operational experience of what you've been able to use with the same capacity, operating the same capacity and factoring that into the projection that you couldn't do.
That's right.
You can't go back 10 years in time, you can only take it from.
Oh, you're right, you're spot on. Yeah, definitely better modeling. One of the models is like even the design storm that we talked, getting better modeling, doing more flow down. Modeling, that is one of the input. There's many inputs to the model. But that's very true. Yeah.
Do you have more sensors too in the plant than what you had perhaps in 2012?
We do have some more sensors. We're using more kind of digital twin types of things as well to keep making the models more precise and more accurate.
Cool, thanks.
So our next steps, again, this kind of mirrors what we did on the conveyance side. So right now we're in the process of either developing or updating our estimates for each of the projects on the CIP. And then once we have those, we'll evaluate timing. And again, the goal is a consistent distribution of costs. So if there's a way to either push a project out or do something else so that we balance it, so we have an even investment over time as much as we can. We also consider aging condition of the equipment and facilities. So most of what we've talked about today focuses on capacity, but we do sometimes need to replace a process or upgrade a process just because it's reached the end of its useful life. So that's information we get by looking at things like the number of work orders in our system and really just talking to our plant staff and operators and figuring out, what's working for them and what's not. And then kind of going through the process of deciding, well, should we try to maintain this for a few more years, knowing that our costs of maintenance on it are going up, or is it time to think about replacing it? So looking ahead a little bit, we'll have draft and final executive summaries and plan documents ready. So I think we're meeting again in June. At that point, we should have a draft of the plan ready for this group to review, as well as a presentation and an executive summary to look at. And then phase 3 of the project is that's really our tools to help implement a living plan. So this is things like the process models that we can update, tools to make updating the trigger plots better and faster, so that we can, as we do that every year, we're getting better and better information. And then Power BI is a software package that we can use to kind of analyze the massive data that we get from our process. Yeah.
On that third bullet, I don't know if there's two answers, maybe one for conveyance, one for the plants. If you can, what's the general age of the infrastructure that's being replaced? And what's the expected or hoped for life cycle of the new things that are going in?
Yeah, it really depends, for something mechanical like a pump, you might be trying in 15, 20 years. Concrete structures, we try for 50. Things that involve, things like sensors kind of move faster than that because the electronics gets outdated. A lot of times the driver is not the equipment itself is obsolete. It's just the manufacturer's moved on and you can't get parts for something anymore. I think on the conveyance side, it's
80 years on the pipelines is what we plan around. 80 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And is that consistent from what's coming out of the ground versus what's going in?
No, not necessarily. A lot of these big interceptors are put in like the late 60s. So they're, a little 50 years old right now. But there's other things that influence the current condition. The sewage is a caustic, solution to send down your pipeline. So H2S kind of erodes away concrete pipes. So our new pipelines we'll be putting in will be alternative materials, either plastics, fiberglass, something that handles that sewage a lot better than the old concrete pipe does. Thank you.
You said that pipes have an 80-year lifespan?
Yes, an 80-year lifespan for our pipes. Yeah.
And that includes the sizing of it too?
So that's based on the material holding up under the conditions that it's under for 80 years, essentially. So capacity, development happening, that's a different factor. That can change the usefulness of that pipeline. When you add a new development upstream of a pipeline of the size to handle a discrete area, now you have additional flows coming in, that pipeline can no longer handle that. So you have to increase the size of that pipeline, which would take it out of service before the end of its useful life. You can't wait for everything to age out on a pipeline replacement because you'd have a huge investment at that time and you wouldn't be able to get all those projects done. So you have to keep looking down through the information you have based on your existing modeling, showing what's going to come down that pipeline as well as the conditions. So our operation and maintenance staff are critical at understanding what's going on in our system. And we use their data to help us understand what's actively going on, to help us kind of regulate where that pipe is at and we use a calculation that we calculate out the remaining useful life based on both condition and that metric of 80 years. So we use that as kind of our standalone metric, but we also factor in all the system data that we have to help us really understand how much life is left in this pipeline.
So how much of the system actually makes it to 80 years?
We have pipes that are 80 years old in our system throughout some of the older areas of Forest Grove. And they're still on operation because they're in good condition because we keep a close eye on those. Some of those pipelines, that are older as well become, trenchlessly rehabbed, for example. We turn those into a new pipe within a pipe. So it's like, always kind of an evaluation of that. But, our system isn't 80 years old in general. Most of our infrastructure was installed in the late 60s. So we have a younger system, but there's areas that have been served traditionally like Forest Grove that has an older system in place as well. Hillsborough is another example. They have some old pipes as well.
CWS does their own maintenance.
Yeah.
What about the capital projects? How do you pick the contractors? What are the criteria? A lot of it makes a decision. Is that your job to do that? No.
This falls down to kind of the way we approach project delivery. So traditionally we do design bid build type projects. So this is an open bid on the marketplace. We take the low bid. That's who gets our projects. We do also some alternative delivery.
For low bid every time.
We have to. That's what we're.
And these are bully wages, right?
There's bully wages factored into that. Yeah. We also do some alternative delivery. So that allows us to work based on qualifications, hire firms, contractors that have the right qualifications to approach more unique projects.
You gotta have the bonding and all that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah.
So just quick timeline of what's coming next. So we should have the executive summary and draft plan ready in just over a month. At the June meeting, we'll be making the request to this group to make a recommendation to the board. Final plans available in July, and then that's when we'll do our briefing to the board, and then we'll request that the board adopt the plan in August. So I think that's it. Unless there are more questions, we've got our subcommittee that we've been working with. Had a few things they want to report out. I'm happy to stay up here and drive unless anybody else wants to remote. Go for it. All right.
Sure. Is that last night? We just kind of went through a lot of things. I just thought a few slides to help give some background, right? Like one of our first meetings, we just kind of talked about like what the goals of the West Basin Master Plan are, right? Kind of like the end result, which we just talked about. But I thought this list, improve the watershed, adapt to uncertainty, future vision, cost-effective, resilient, kind of summed up what the West Basin goals were all about, kind of like a macro setting. So pretty straightforward with this slide, right? And then seen this slide already, but just in case you didn't know what the West Basin service area is or was, there it is again, and kind of where it divides with the East Basin Master Plan. And one of our meetings, we talked a lot about different alternatives and what that meant for a lot of different things. And I thought it was just like a helpful slide. Remind me, yellow was the least effective, I believe. And it's not just like one option, only doing this. Lots of different alternatives based on lots of different subjects. You can see flow management, climate resiliency, capital costs, emerging contaminants, and kind of costs related with those different alternatives. And obviously what's the benefit to the river, since the water quality is always a big topic for clean water services and often comes up. There is opportunities to advance or help the environment or the river flow and the river watershed as well. And this is just kind of like a few slides or alternatives and opportunities to do that while these projects are happening. That's kind of what I had.
So I think my comments, first off, I just really want to thank the staff, Rick, you and the rest of the team for the time you took and the way you listened, and just the effort that you folks put into communicating with us and bringing us along as you talked through the challenges you were looking at. And in kind of typical fashion, I didn't stay within the parameters of how you had originally scoped the project. So I just want to reiterate, and more for the benefit, I think, of everyone else here, because I think you folks heard me loud and clear, and were very accepting of my comments, that every opportunity we can take through all of these different projects, small, medium, large, to be good neighbors. If that's installing a pump station that's near a bus stop and you can stick a shade tree in there to make it more pleasant for people in the neighborhood, let's always look through that filter of people, fish, wildlife, plants, and the river. And integrate. I have a terrible habit of bringing up stormwater and bringing up flow and natural systems when we're talking about engineering. And it is truly a mind-blowing and remarkable exercise in engineering. I'm so impressed with you guys. But wherever you can, choose locations where you can elevate, where you can benefit somehow, integrate habitat climate considerations, whether it's some solar panels for backup, whether it's an eco roof or installing deep rooted sedges to sequester some carbon. You know, let's really, I just really appreciate an openness to a more integrated approach. And, you know, noise, light pollution, all of those factors. But I'll leave it at that. You all know I could go on and on and on, and I really shouldn't. So thank you.
And the other thing that I might add is just the doubling down perhaps on just the confidence, I guess, that it gave us three as laypersons, the patience you guys used to walk us through it and help us understand that it was being looked at from a number of different ways. And some of those ranking categories were tweaked due to our feedback. So it was appreciated that it wasn't just a check the box experience for us. I don't think any of us felt that. So thank you. And it certainly was kind of confidence inspiring in terms of the deep look that's going on for, you know, a 70, 100, 150 year, 200 year, you know, look of what this service needs to provide going forward. So I appreciate it.
Thank you all for the input. I think we did better this time than East Basin. In getting that input to the non-economic criteria, you asked really good questions. We were able to bring in some of the folks from natural systems to make sure everybody was hearing the information that we're providing, and your help with the vision and your help with how we developed our alternatives. So it's extra time for y'all to have joined up for that subcommittee, but we found it really valuable, and I do really appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo what Rick said. I think we got outstanding feedback, particularly when it came to the things like the non-economic factors. I mean, we made us really think about how we were, how we were scoring alternatives and what things we should emphasize. Just goes to making the end product better. Right? I think we definitely did that.
Great.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, the next agenda item is comments from the Clean Water Services Chair and Chief of Staff. Chair Harrington.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Switching from one topic to another, I assume if anybody needs to take a break, you'll do that. But thank you very much for sharing your agenda time tonight. As you may have noticed, Clean Water Services has been in the news media. And so in working with the staff team, I thought it would be important to come and make myself as a board member available to hear your questions, your comments, and your concerns. And I did the same thing with the mayors last Friday. We, the board of directors, have adopted a plan, a resolution to address several of the items that we've had the opportunity to learn about and that you've had a chance to read about. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know quite as well. I used to, when I'm Catherine Harrington, the elected chair of the board of directors. And when I started on the board in 2019, I would frequently try to attend CWAC meetings because I was learning all about the nature of CWS and all that it entailed. So I found that in addition to all of our work sessions and business meetings and briefings, coming to CWAC meetings, or for those meetings I couldn't make, just reviewing your materials was really helpful. But I and my fellow board members also had the benefit of seeing how valuable CWAC is to us. It's quite different compared to other advisory boards and commissions that we have in local government. You help form these plans, review these plans, look at different alternatives. And the board knows it. Our staff reports on it as well. And I've had a chance to see it through the hydro modification standards, design and construction standards, which I know Matt will remember as well. So thank you very much for contributing your time and your expertise, not just at these meetings, but in other matters, other places, and also taking the knowledge that you gain through serving on CWAC and helping others in our large community learn about the work that we do. Because it's pretty geeky stuff, but also people just want the flow to go, right? You know, we want to turn our lights on and get the electricity. We want to turn on our faucets and get clean drinking water. And then we want the flow out of our sinks, out of our toilets, out of our businesses to just be taken care of seamlessly and not take too much of our individual time. So I wanted to make sure that I came not just tonight, but on into the future so that you know that the board of directors takes these recent matters very seriously. And I know that our team shared with you the resolution that we acted on Tuesday, as well as the statement from the board, as well as Diane's statement as well. So looking ahead, I will presume you've all had the opportunity to look into that. I'll just summarize what our resolution addresses. We're going to hire an outside auditor to examine the district's board and meal expenditures. We're going to have a review and restrict expenditures by the district's management team, review the domicile arrangement for the Clean Water Insurance Company, which is the captive insurance district that we have to provide the insurance coverage for the $1.5 billion of assets and deal with some of the very same challenges you've heard about here. We've already revised the meal and refreshment policy, but we're going to review how that's going and revise it as necessary. The training and travel, the travel and training policy as well is being revised. And we want to ensure, as we are a public agency, continue to train all of our employees on the compliance with the laws and district policies related to those expenditures. Lastly, we have directed the CEO to work with the board on a plan to restore any trust that we have lost. Trust by our community, our customers, our ratepayers, businesses, trust in our local government partners, the cities. Very important. We do not do this work by ourselves. We do it in partnership. But also any trust we have lost through our employees, as well as writ large or with board of directors. So as I've mentioned, we are a public entity, and we need to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to be good stewards of the ratepayer dollars, but also of that community trust. No government works in isolation. And I know for a fact that what has transpired here has put tremendous pressure on our local government partners. And the fact that we are in public service for our shared community. So I also want you to know that as members of our community and members of CWAC, you deserve to know that your board of directors is on top of the finances of this agency. That we, the board, attend to the large organizational management with and through the chief executive officer. You also deserve to know what that captive insurance company and that vehicle is and its role, what the role of Quick is for CWS. And lastly, CWS rate setting, right? We've mentioned it a couple of times here tonight, having steady rates. How does it work? Those of you who are long tenured on the budget committee probably know more about it than others. It's kind of complicated. Guess what? It is not enough that our finance staff, our staff team, that the board members, that our budget committee members understand it. I want to make sure that our local government partners understand it, that you understand it, and that you can explain it. Why is it important? What's its role? So we have work to do there. It shouldn't just seem like complicated magic. So lastly, I want to make sure that you know there are future opportunities for transparency and engagement with us. And that's why I thought it would be important for me to come tonight, the first CWAC meeting with our action. We have the budget meeting coming up Friday, May 9th. We're also looking at a forum to go over what a captive insurance corporation is. And the last couple of years in having Joe Gall join the team, we've hosted a program that some of you have participated in, the CWS Essentials program. We ran it in the early part of 23 and the early part of this year, 2025, to try and help ensure that local elected officials, but also CWAC members, had an opportunity to learn more about the history of clean water services and some of the whys and what fors about why we do what we do and how this agency is a creation of our community. The voters approved the establishment of this joint sewerage agency. And we have an incredible system here compared to other places. And the board really feels the responsibility of being good stewards, looking out into the future. So I don't want to be the only one talking here. As I said, I'm here for your questions and to hear your comments and concerns. I don't know, Elizabeth, if there's something more you wanted to add?
Thank you, Chair. I had about 30 seconds worth of an addition, just to say as the sort of primary liaison to CWAC, that I heard from some of you, many of you, with concerns and questions, and wanted to know if there was going to be an opportunity to talk about what you were hearing, and also some asked, gosh, could we hear from the chair? So I want you to know we'll be here. We're trying to be responsive. Grateful to the chair for being here this evening. And that's the extent of my comments. This is an open floor for our CWAC members.
Please don't be shy.
Thank you. As the representative to CWAC of the Washington County cities, I'm a non-voting rep, of course. I convened the city managers of the partner cities last week and had a conversation about this, and they authorized me to make a statement, and I previewed it for Diane and Joe and Elizabeth and Chair Song and Chair Harrington, but This is an authorized statement from the partner cities. So I want to start by saying that Clean Water Services is an essential partner to the cities of Washington County. And Clean Water Services is held in high regard for the innovative, strategic, vital work that they do. None of the cities in Washington County provide sanitary, sewer, and stormwater services alone. We all rely on Clean Water Services, their expertise, their infrastructure, their acumen in this space. Our staff work with Clean Water Services staff on a daily basis, whether that is on permitting or stormwater quality facilities or fats, oils, grease collectors, and so much more. We heard an example of it tonight. Clean Water Services is our go-to partner for this essential service, and they are a trusted partner. Trust is a delicate thing. We spend years building it, nurturing it, fretting over it, knowing that the trust the community puts in us, our elected officials, our organizations, is fundamental to being able to carry out the vital work that we are entrusted with, whether that's police, fire, libraries, water, and sewer. And we do not take that trust for granted, because when something happens to any of us and that trust is breached, we are all negatively impacted. And we find ourselves in a situation where the public trust has been breached and has taken a hit. And that is troubling to all of us. There are potentially very real consequences at the local level, whether that's the ballot box, in public meetings, or just in interactions with residents at the local market. It is not my place to sit in judgment or to point fingers, but it is my place to champion that we do everything in our power to help rebuild the public trust. It will take time, and it will take mindful actions. As city managers of the partner cities in Washington County, we believe there are several specific actions that will help in this trust building process. And the board has acknowledged and done some of these. Number one, we ask that Clean Water Services hire a third-party auditor to conduct an independent forensic audit of their operations, policies, practices, and financials. This is above and beyond the required annual financial audit that is conducted for Clean Water Services, and the board resolution reflected that. Number two, we ask that Clean Water Services come to the partner cities at least annually to present information pertaining to rates and any proposed rate adjustments. Number three, we ask that Clean Water Services initiate with the partner cities an exploration of centralizing billing services in-house. And finally, we ask that Clean Water Services commits to transparency and upholding Oregon public records and meeting laws with regards to the Clean Water Insurance Company, regardless of where the company is based. It is so important that we get this right, because getting it wrong has dire consequences for all of us. Thank you for your partnership, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. Appreciate it.
Any other comments from the commission?
I emailed Elizabeth some questions today. I don't expect a response, and it's not trying to put pressure on anything. Just after reading the FAQ pages and reading articles, I just kind of asked her, does CWS have any other subsidiaries or entities, like we have the insurance company, are there others of those? In the budget we're going to be looking at here in April and May, does the larger budget include money needed for the insurance company costs subsidiaries, or is that a separate budget? Our travel costs, our meal expenditures included in that budget we'll be looking at, or is that separate? And then the last one, I just said in the Oregonian op-ed editorial, they mentioned the subsidiary has no employees and lists a mailing address of a giant insurance services firm, yet the administrative costs were listed at more than $315,000 in the 2024 fiscal year. So I was just curious where that $315,000 goes. Other than that, I don't have any more comments.
This is Ramesh, and
Response presently. Just got it this afternoon, so thank you, Andy. Thoughtful questions.
Thank you for listening.
Question from the online people.
yeah, this is Ramesh, District 2. I just wanted to share two thoughts or two comments.
Ramesh, we're unable to hear you.
Oh, it's happening again. Is better? Can you hear me? Is this audible?
Okay, it's the same issue.
I think I still have some technical issues. Can you hear me now? Can I speak? Can I speak? Can I speak? Am I audible? 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 Audible now? Okay. Sorry. Just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. First one is, since I'm not a news junkie, I never got to read those articles and the news that came out, but I did follow up on that later. The first thought that came to my mind was CWS being a provider of such a service to the public, and it's got a fairly big budget. And when we have that kind of a budget and those kind of both expenses and income is involved in providing the service, there are some items which are sensitive, which is what caused the news things to come out, even though in proportion to the overall budget or things like that, it doesn't matter how much was the money spent on what it was spent and so on. But like some of you said, it's the perception and it is the trust that was lost with the public that made a difference. And I really appreciate that the CWS staff and the board of directors recognize that. And I really applaud the efforts to take some action on that, doing the resolutions and bringing up some more things and so on. That's really nice. And I hope this is some kind of a learning experience with which we will apply the discretion and thoughtfulness in future expenses. I've been in the corporate world. We spend way more than what was in the news item for team building, for T-shirts, for swags, for employee recognition, travel, you name it. Um, but the fact that this is a public trust, it's we as wards of public funds, we need to be a little more sensitive, and that's what came across to me. And thank you for taking it to seriously and coming up with some kind of an action on that. That was the first thing. The second thing that I want to take away, and I'll probably come and talk about it during the budget meetings, is we should probably take the same kind of approach to a lot of other expenses, big ticket items included. I know as a governmental process or as an organizational process, there are going to be several ways in which the budget items are going to be proposed, are going to be reviewed, are going to be scrutinized. But this probably gives us a chance to say, how are we really estimating those expenses? How are we making it optimal? How are we making it efficient? I'll probably share some thoughts when we get to the budget meeting, because this year, for the first time, I'll be at the budget meeting. As a general, PSA, I'm trying to say, let's take this instance as a way to say, whenever we come up with a budget amount, are we really doing the best to get the most returns for our ratepayers from the best way we spend that money? Those are my two thoughts, and thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you very much. Katie, do we have any questions in the chat? Oh, okay, that was just related to our audiovisual issues. Yes, yeah.
I can make a few comments. I haven't delved deeply into the board's action or Diane's. I did speak with the Oregonian, and I thought maybe it would be appropriate to share with the rest of you the thoughts that I shared with the reporter. Generally speaking, in my experience so far on CWAC, Clean Water Services has been really thoughtful and deliberate in evaluating alternatives and making decisions. So I welcome the reevaluation of this captive insurance company. I don't really expect a different outcome from that evaluation, just going on my past experience with clean water. I'm inclined to give folks the benefit of the doubt. Although I don't have direct knowledge, and so I'm going to have more information later. I also wanted to point out that this captive insurance company and traveling to Hawaii and meeting there, you know, that most of the peers of that company appear to be private entities. And as a lifetime public servant, government employee at multiple levels, and then having helped run a small business for a while, I can say pretty confidently, the yardsticks are different, you know? I was not surprised that it would be more luxurious, more expensive. If you are in that group and you want to do their trainings, some of it's a cost of doing business for that kind of a thing. I'm not trying to say that it's necessarily a great idea to make whatever spending choices were made. I'm just saying, in some ways, we're a little bit apples and oranges here. The other piece that was in the first article, but not the second, was a mention of basically a travel accommodation for Diane with sufficient legroom for air travel not to be a barrier. And I feel the same way about that as I told the reporter, as if I go to a conference and there is one hearing impaired person and two sign language interpreters taking turns, I don't mind paying for that. That is a reasonable accommodation. And I just thought that was not the best thing to call out. I think the rest of my comments, I think I share some of what I've heard others say, that there is a perception of opacity, of lack of transparency. And I did not hear that the first time with this reporting. I've heard it from the community before. And so I welcome the opportunity to try to find some ways to try to be a bit more open, more transparent, and help turn that perception around. Oh, and one more thing about the travel expenses, also as a lifelong government employee, you know, I think we also have to be careful not to expect anybody funded by public funds to have to go camping instead of staying in a hotel. I mean, it's a different yardstick, and I think the public also has different yardsticks for what we should be able to do as public servants. So just context, that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Elaine. Any further comments or questions?
Yeah, just one quick comment. I really appreciate what Andy had to say. I was going to ask similar ones. Can we get responses? Not a rush, but when you do get responses, I would love it if that came to me, and maybe I'll CWAC. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I would appreciate that. The other thing, in Elaine, I was thinking about some of the similar things that you are. I would caution. I think that yes, maybe to play in that area that you might need to play in with some of the vendors. That's great. That may be true. That's going to fall on completely deaf ears to ratepayers. And so I just would caution against saying that that's the price of playing the game, because if you are a general ratepayer, you are absolutely not going to hear that. And so just I would caution on that one for certain, because that I just don't see that that playing well with anybody at all. In the general public. So I think that's something to be very careful treading on.
Yeah, they want us to go cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to our invitation for public comment. I'll now welcome any members of the public who would like to provide public comment. You'll have up to 2 minutes, and Katie will be your timekeeper.
Dale Feek. I'm gonna go up there or sit here.
Whatever you prefer.
I'll go up there.
Okay.
The microphone may be better.
I just want to say thank you again for sharing all your comments and questions, whether it's in writing or verbally. Really appreciate it.
Dale Feek, and I've been an active observer here for many years now. It's Clean Water Service Advisory Committee, and I appreciate being invited here. You're a timer, so please let me know when I have 15 seconds. Oh, okay, thanks. I watched just before I came the Blair Best KGW TV report of last night's meeting. Well, excuse me, I just watched that. Interesting, she quoted me. And the one thing I did say when I was interviewed by that is I said, I really appreciate what Clean Water Service does and what technical expertise, particularly the PFAS. And I said to her when she interviewed me, and that wasn't on the report, I said that it's Clean Water Services at the top of the game. They have the best equipment for measuring, testing PFAS chemicals. They've done excellent work on research and how that stuff is measured throughout the county. So I said that, but that wasn't what I was quoted. What I was quoted was this. Some community ratepayers, Dale Feek, said they were in favor of independent audit, calling it the first step. And I still believe that. So the independent audit is the first step, but we need to continue exploring and getting better on transparency. And I really appreciate Chair Harrington and working with Diane with CWAC and also the trainings that Clean Water Services puts on for the board of directors, because now it's transparent. There are microphones. It is recorded. There are minutes. That didn't happen in the past. And through the leadership of Chair Harrington and others, it is becoming more transparent. So I just want to say I appreciate Chair Harrington and the board and also Clean Water Service and the staff. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Dale. Dan,
I really want to thank all of you, Cheryl, Glenn, Alan, Andy, and Mark, and Elaine, and Nisha, and Ramesh. Your comments, I listen to everything. I read everything. And I very much appreciate that because I understand the chair and the board, we're gonna work together on the plan for accountability and to work on our trust. And there's lots of information that we want to correct because there's misinformation. So our fact sheets and our statements are where we do that work. It was really hard yesterday when a ratepayer thought she was paying anywhere from $450 to $900 in a sewer bill to clean water services, because that isn't true. That's what she believed. That's what she said. But when we looked at her bill, she pays the normal rate for 10 units of water, and it was $115 for 2 months, which is roughly, Stu calculated at $57.50. So we have to teach people about what we do, what their bills look like, because there's joint billing, as Sharon said. So we'll continue to help our customers, reach out to them, talk to them, and help foster this understanding. But I thank you, and I think you pointed some questions we should answer and have on our fact sheet. So, but thank you all very much.
Any public comments from people online?
Please use the raise hand function.
You can use your raise hand function. Okay, seeing none, there will be no further business this evening. CWAC is now adjourned. Next meeting will be held on June 11th. So apparently no May meeting.
No May meeting because we have the budget meeting. But please check your email. We will be sharing more information.
Great. It's the June meeting here.
And I have to check. It shows it that it's here. And it's here, the one that you sent. It's fantastic. June 11th at ABC. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Later, man.